This is the story of the rise and fall of a legendary city and its long hidden legacy of hundreds of thousands of ancient manuscripts. Set against a backdrop of great empires and visionary leaders, it tells how trade routes from the east became ink roads, bringing writing to the heart of West Africa, and how Timbuktu became its leading light, and how invasions and conquest caused that story to be buried literally. Africa's storytellers, guardians of its history, have had their oral traditions dismissed as mere song and dance, and the assumed lack of a literary heritage interpreted as meaning Africa doesn't have its own intellectual traditions. But now a different truth is emerging that tells us the reading and writing of books has been as important a part of life in Africa as it has in Europe. And as Timbuktu's manuscripts are brought out of hiding, the conviction grows that what they have to tell us may forever rewrite Africa's history. What's incredible is that I'm in a small village in Mali, in Africa, on the edge of the Sahara Desert. It's about the last place on earth I'd expect to find manuscripts hundreds of years old. But this is where the search for the lost libraries of Timbuktu really begins. Europeans dreamed of reaching Timbuktu ever since stories began to circulate in medieval times of a desert El Dorado whose streets were paved with gold. My journey was as mundane as any these days. Several flights and an overnight in Mali's capital Bamako before the last leg to Timbuktu. It wasn't until the 19th century that European explorers set out to survey Africa and to search for the fabled city of Timbuktu. Their journeys across deserts and along rivers took years, led to violent encounters with desert tribesmen and cost lives. So Timbuktu became forever synonymous with remoteness and mystery, the farthest place on earth. I grew up in Sierra Leone, and I've long known that Timbuktu was in Mali, in the Sahara Desert. But it was only passing through here a few years ago I realised there was much more to Timbuktu than meets the eye. That this seemingly unremarkable desert town was once a splendid city of scholars, and from the 13th century, West Africa's most important seat of learning. Until 1960, Mali was a French colony, and French has remained the official language. Only after independence did the custodians of Timbuktu's manuscripts feel it was safe to bring their cultural treasures out of hiding. This is one of around 30 libraries opened in Timbuktu in recent years. Between them, the libraries have over 70,000 manuscripts. Timbuktu's libraries are run by families whose ancestors began collecting books and documents 8 centuries ago. The new libraries house whatever remnants of those collections have survived the ravages of time, and their contents offer an invaluable source for a new understanding of West African history. At the Mama Haidara Library, Abdul Qadir Haidara has agreed to show me some of his collection, manuscripts on astronomy, medicine and theology, including commentaries on the sayings of the Prophet. These particular manuscripts date from around the 16th and 17th centuries. This one's been nibbled by termites.
This is a really interesting manuscript about astronomy. These are the astronomic drawings showing the position of all stars. I'm not an expert, but that is what they tell us.
They knew more about it then than I do now.
It shows you how to calculate the position of the stars using these letters and numbers.
Next, he showed me a 16th century manuscript.
So this is a text of the Prophet's sayings. What's more, there are all these notes in the margin. In the past, there were very little paper, and they were very expensive, so the margins of books were often used just like today when we use a diary. I saw one example where the writer said, "Today there was an earthquake in Timbuktu."
And all that was written in the margins by people who came after.
Voilà.
Oui.
Donc, aussi, manuscrit qui parle de médecine.
And here's a 500-year-old recipe for toothpaste.
Bon, il y a quelque chose ici, si tu fais ça avec le brosse.
You take some salt and some sugar and mix that together with some charcoal and brush it on your teeth every day, and your teeth will become white.
Oui.
Le brosse à chaque matin.
And what's more, it will get rid of your bad breath.
La bouche devient propre.
So how did the libraries first come into being? How were they lost? And how will their discovery alter perceptions of Africa? At the end of the 10th century, when Timbuktu was founded, a large part of West Africa was under the rule of the Ghana Empire. It was West Africa's first superpower, and its leaders were early converts to Islam. The spread of Islam was the compelling factor that changed history here and gave Africa its literary tradition.
Islam spread from the Arabian Peninsula, from Egypt and then along the coast of North Africa. But some other Muslims came from the north, the ones who founded Timbuktu, and being traders, spread Islam from the Sahara to the south coast.
Just as in Europe, where most early manuscripts were religious works written in Latin, in Timbuktu the bulk of the texts are written in Arabic and concern Islamic theology. The Ahmed Baba Institute, the only public library, holds Mali's national collection. Set up in 1973, it now has over 40,000 manuscripts. The head librarian told me just how many turn up on a weekly basis. It's an impressive number.
Every week we get about 700.
600 or 700 a week?
Yes, per week. So, when the manuscripts arrive here, the first thing we have to do is evaluate them to see what conditions they are in. We pick out all the best ones, but the ones that are too damaged, we put to one side.
The manuscripts are being digitized so they can eventually be made available to a worldwide scholarship. But the first priority has to be the conservation and preservation of the manuscripts. In 2001, South Africa's then President, Thabo Mbeki, visited the Institute and hailed the manuscripts as among the continent's greatest cultural treasures. He immediately gave funding for their preservation. Alexio Motsi is a South African conservator, making regular visits to Timbuktu to work on delicate and often damaged manuscripts, and equally importantly, to train local people in conservation skills.
To come here to Mali to see what was here was actually a serious motivation for me, because it was a dream come true for a conservator.
Must have been like finding the gold at the end of the rainbow.
It was more than finding gold, because being aware of the sort of the historical background that Africa doesn't have documentary heritage, this for me was also another motivation which made me become very passionate.
At least 300,000 manuscripts are known to exist in the region, but so far only a tiny percentage have been translated or studied in any detail.
A lot of them have not been read, 1,000 at most. So there are lots of manuscripts that we got, and that's really exciting. But it also gives us the idea of the challenge that lies ahead, you know, and how much work that must be done on the manuscripts.
The conservation, cataloguing, translation and study of all the known manuscripts is a task which could take decades. But thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of manuscripts are still out there, some hidden behind walls, some in cellars, and some still buried in the sands of the desert. The last 300 years have dealt a succession of blows to Timbuktu. Morocco invaded at the end of the 16th century. Violent power struggles between rival fundamentalist Islamic sects created anarchy throughout the late 18th and 19th centuries, followed swiftly by the final indignity of French colonization. Like other victors, the French took away manuscripts as the spoils of victory. To protect their heritage, the owners of manuscripts hid their collections. Timbuktu's libraries went underground. Over the last 50 years, the manuscripts have gradually been brought out into the open again, but their owners are still suspicious.
Searching for manuscripts, it's a bit like prospecting for gold.